My name is Kyle Clark. I'm here representing the Omaha Youth Advisory Council. What advice would you have for a forming nonprofit organization?
For forming a nonprofit organization? Well, I've always tried to avoid forming nonprofit organizations. Well, that would depend entirely on what I wanted to accomplish. I mean, it'd be one thing if it was a hospital. It could be another thing. There's so many types of it. So you've got to get people that are experienced and involved in an entity like that. And but it depends so much on the objective you're working at. Yeah, I promised this young lady here microphone for a long time.
Hi, my name is Cara and I attend Millard West High School. And I understand that you're very civically involved, and I was wondering how important of a quality you think that is for an individual in life and why.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that I am that. I mean, I do certain civic things. I think your model as a citizen, for example, in Omaha would be Walter Scott. I mean, he is far more civically involved than I am, and incidentally, his predecessor, Peter Kiewit, was too, but Walter's carried it to new heights. So I don't want to take on any mantle for that myself. I do some things. One of the problems I have is I love what I do so much that it sort of takes over. I mean, I'm like a guy that likes to play a lot of golf or something, except I like the business I'm in. But I've got a family that participates very actively. Some of my children work on almost anything that comes along in the civic area, and in the end, people do what they want to do to quite a degree, and I think I've never talked to anybody that enjoyed working in civic activities that didn't feel where it was very worthwhile after they've done it. I mean, they built something, and participating in building something is always a lot of fun. And actually, you can have a good time. We have this golf tournament, for example, in September, and we raised some money for civic things, but everybody has a good time, so nobody's paying any price by doing it. I'm having a good time. The people who come are having a good time, and we get to show Omaha off to people. But you should be enjoying things you go along, and you will if you work in civic activities that interest you. And you can do the same thing in politics. I mean, if you find political ideas or politicians who particularly you identify with, you can get a lot of self-satisfaction out of working, and you're doing something worthwhile. So just follow your instincts on that. That'd be my recommendation.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Graham from Millard South High School. We're probably the elite youth of today, and I have a question. What do you see as the biggest economic problem facing the youth of today going into the future?
Yeah, I don't think that you're going to have enormous economic problems. I think you will live in a society where the average person lives better by a significant margin than the average one of a generation earlier or two generations earlier. That's been the history of this country. It's a marvelous country that way. I mean, when you think of it, we have 4.5% of the world's population, and what's been accomplished here is incredible. 53% of the value of corporations that are publicly traded in the world exists in the United States with 4.5% of the population. This country always has done well. They say in stocks that you should buy stock in a business that's so good that even an idiot can run it, because sooner or later one will. And that's not terrible advice. Well, that seems to have been sort of the history of this country from time to time. I mean, we've had all these problems that have come along. If you look back on the last 100 years and list all the problems this country's run into, you can make a very long list. And a lot of people who focused on those problems at the time have missed the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that every generation lives better than the one before it. And that's because of savings, because savings enable people to create new tools to do better things as they go along. And it's also due to an environment that lets people realize their potential to a greater degree than most other environments in the world. It's far from perfect. I mean, it's sad how far it is from perfect. but it is better than anything else around. I mean, in this country, you don't have some commissar or something running a big business in this country. You've got a guy like Jack Welch, and a fellow like Jack Welch makes a difference of night and day in terms of the productivity of that business over a period of decades. And productivity is what causes the standard of living to rise. So a system that throws up the Jack Welches of the world to run businesses is going to have an enormous advantage over a society that does it by heredity or that does it by government edict. And we're closer to that society that I've described than any other country, and it's led to great things, and it will continue to lead to great things. So I think you've got the best future. You don't face a war, and you've got a better future in terms of achieving material rewards than any generation in history. So I wish I could trade you places. I might get taken up on that by a few of you, though.
Hi, I'm Ryan Wilkins from Millard West High School, and I was wondering if you could speak for Mr. Gates were afraid of the impact on Y2K on the economy, or specifically the stock market.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you gave me a chance to bring in other people, because I'm the last guy in the world to understand about Y2K. I don't know why this microphone's working. I don't know why lights go on. Or I flip on the switch of my television set and pray. I mean, it's all beyond me. But I would say this: the smartest people I know in that area, in large part, think it's going to be a non-event. In this country, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but so I think you'll wake up on January 1st and find the world hasn't changed from December 31st. Now, I would say this: you might get a whole bunch of friends to write you checks for $1 billion on December 31st and then deposit them, and who knows what'll happen? You can't lose anything. I mean, all they do is bounce, and if the system gets fouled up, you might find a lot of money in your account. But I wouldn't count on it. We own a company called Executive Jet. We have about 1,400 or 1,500 customers who own pieces of airplanes with us, and we've got 160 of their planes and some of our own flying around. It'll be very interesting to me to see what the advance people let us know ahead of time when they want to use it. It'll be very interesting to see how many sign up for January 1st at 12:01. But it wouldn't bother me to fly him in the least on January 1st or do anything else on January 1st. Ideally, I hope they're getting prepared to watch the Huskers play in the big game.
I'm Jamie Solis from Twin Valley, and I was wondering, how do you decide what you invest your time and money in?
Yeah, well, I like to find businesses that have good economics. Now, what are good economics? Well, good economics are a business that has some kind of a moat around it that makes its product or its service or its location or something a little more desirable to the customer than any other sort of comparable product. The number one candy bar in the last 30 or 40 years has been Snickers. People don't fool around with different candy bars. They fool around with different length dresses. They fool around, with all kinds of things. But they don't fool around with candy bars because they figure, they're going to go in and lay out 50 cents or whatever it is and put it in their mouth. And they're not going to, for 50 cents and putting it in your mouth, you're not going to say, I'll lay out 45 cents and put something else in my mouth. So you find that very stable. And we like businesses that we think we can figure out where they're going to be in 10 or 15 years. I don't know where the information technology businesses are going to be in 10 or 15 years. I know where Snickers bars are going to be in 10 or 15 years. They're going to be selling just about the way they do now. I know where Wrigley's gum is going to be in 10 or 15 years. There's not going to be a lot of innovation in chewing gum. The Internet's not going to cause people to quit chewing gum either. Gates may think so, but I don't think so. But it's predictability regarding the sustainability of a competitive advantage, something special about a product. So we look for those kind of products, and then we look for people that are running the business that are honest and able. And, you know, it's easier to find people that are honest and able than it is to find businesses that are going to stay wonderful for a long period of time. There are a lot of businesses that looked like they were going to stay wonderful that really evaporated over time. But that's what we're looking for. And the nice thing about it is we don't have to find very many. If we find one a year, that's terrific. You know, because you don't need 100 or 1,000 great investment ideas to do well. You need a couple. And the discipline is the most important thing. We don't need brain power. We need discipline. You don't need 150 IQ to do what I do. Thank God. You know, you don't need 140. You don't need 135. You may need 115 or something like that. But you do need discipline. You have to wait until you see the fat pitch to swing at. Because investing is a no-called strike game. You know, if I were a baseball player and I only liked pitches 2 inches above my navel, you know, some guy could learn that and he could pitch me, you know, 3 or 4 inches below that, and I get called out on strikes because I never find a pitch I like. You can get called out on strikes in baseball. You have to swing at pitches that you don't even necessarily like, particularly after the count gets to 2 strikes. In business, you don't have to swing at anything. You can sit there and the paper says General Motors at 68, or it says General Electric at 115, or it says General Dynamics at 63. And if you don't like those prices, you don't have to swing. You can wait there day after day after day after day, and there are no called strikes. Now, when you swing, when you decide to buy something, then, you know, if you swing and miss, it's a strike. But it's a marvelous game to be in because there are no called strikes, and you can simply wait for that one time in a month or 6 months or a year or 2 or 3 years when you really know what you're doing, where you like the price, where you like the people running the business, and then you swing, and you only need a few swings in your lifetime. So that's the way we try to pick businesses. We try to stay with things we understand. I mean, there can be all kinds of wonderful investment opportunities out there that I don't understand. I don't know what cocoa beans are going to do next year. You know, maybe you know, but I don't know. I don't know what crude oil is going to sell for. But I don't have to know. I just have to know the things. I have to know what I know. I have to know where the limits of my understanding are, what I call what my circle of competence is. And if I'm only able to evaluate 5% of the businesses in the world, no problem. I just stay within that 5% and try and find something. And most people get in trouble in investments because they get itchy. You know, they can't discipline themselves, and they hear about other people making money. Nothing upsets people so much as to hear about their friends making money. I mean, that's very destructive to discipline because they think, you know, I'm smarter than that guy next door, and he just bought that new car with the money he made trading stocks on the internet, so why can't I? Well, the answer is you can't over time. You will lose money if you trade stocks actively. And it's hard to exercise the discipline. But anytime you buy something, you should be able to take out a one-page sheet of paper and say, I'm buying General Motors at 65. I'm buying General Electric at 150 because. And you should write down the reasons. If you can't fill out the sheet, if it's because somebody told me about it at a cocktail party last night, that's not good enough. If it's because my broker told me about it, that's not good enough. You know, you've got to have a reason for thinking that it makes an intelligent investment. You do the same thing if you're buying a farm or an apartment house. If you're buying a farm, you'd say, I'm buying this farm at $1,000 an acre because I think I can earn $60 an acre on it. If corn sells at such and such, and soybean sells at such and such, and yield is such and such. And you'd figure it out. That's the same reason you buy businesses. And when you buy stocks, you're buying a little piece of a business. And that's probably the most important thing to remember in investing is that when you are buying a stock, you're buying a little piece of the business. And if you are buying it at an attractive price for the business, for the whole business, you're going to make money. And if you aren't, you know, over time you won't make money.
Hi, my name is Cliff McAvoy from Elkhorn Mount Michael. Reverend Jesse Jackson talked to us earlier. He seemed to believe that the moral standards of today's society will eventually affect us in business. How do you feel this will affect us as youth growing up in the United States?
He said the moral standards will affect us how?
Like moral decay in society today will affect us in business by how we feel and how we interact with other people.
Well, I think very difficult to quantify moral standards over time. I mean, you know, you can pick out huge weaknesses at any given time in terms of how people or the country is behaving in huge strengths. So I think it's enormously difficult to quantify. I think, by and large, we have made progress in what I would call institutionalized moral standards in this country. I mean, in terms of slavery, in terms of the women couldn't vote, a century ago. Half the country were second-class citizens in that respect, and they had much lesser rights in terms of inheritance and all kinds of things. The income tax didn't exist 100 years ago, so the idea of taxing people according to how much they benefited from society and their income didn't exist. So I think, in terms of institutionalized moral standards, the country has made really quite significant progress in the last 100 years. I think, there's an enormous distance to go. I think we're going in the right direction, maybe by fits and starts, but I think we're going in the right direction, and I think that it will be a significant plus to everybody in this room if they live in a more moral society 40 years from now than a less moral. But I think the odds are that they will. I think the country moves in that direction. It's very difficult to do it, and all kinds of interests that work against it. But in the end, I think the American people want it. And you saw it in civil rights. I mean, it took television to dramatize what was going on, and people that weren't near it preferred not to think about it. But it got through to the conscience of the American people. And a lot of progress has been made there, and there's a lot left to be made, but it's better than it was. And the pace may seem very slow to those people involved, and I can understand that. The pace, for women's suffrage, I mean, that went for decades and decades and decades. Women couldn't be on a jury. I was reading the trial of Clarence Darrow, which took place in California in about 10 or 11. There were no women on the jury. The woman wasn't allowed to be on a jury. They weren't citizens in that sense. So it's the moral behavior of the country has, in my view, improved, but and it'll continue to improve, and I hope you all in this room do your part to help it improve.
Hi, I'm Nick Jors from Central High, and I was wondering how, since the stock market's so high right now, if it'd be smart for us to get involved now, or to wait till it goes down a little, or what?
Yeah, I can't tell you whether or not to buy stocks now generally. I think it's important that you save money, and whether you put it in the stock market or not, I don't think is terribly important. I think if you're interested in stocks, you should buy it, and you've got a little capital, you should buy a few. I mean, I don't think there's any way of learning about them better than experiencing it. Doing it on paper isn't the same. I can guarantee you, if you lose money on paper or lose real money, it's a different experience. And so I think you'll learn more about yourself if you do it that way. I bought my first stock when I was 11. I was at Rose Hill at the time, and I bought 3 shares of City Service Preferred at 38, and it went down to 27, which is something I still remember, even though I was 11 at the time. And then it went up to 40, and I sold it. I made $5 on my 3 shares after commissions, and then it went to 200 and something. So, I probably remember that a little better than if I'd been doing it on paper. And I fooled around doing a lot of things between about age 11 and 19 in the stock market. I did charts, I did all kinds of technical analysis, I read every book I could get on the subject, and I didn't do that well. I didn't do terrible, but I was really just floundering around. But that meant by the age of 19, when I read Ben Graham's book, I was at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, I went and bought this book called The Intelligent Investor. It just come out, and it had an enormous impact on me. Now, if I hadn't done, in the previous 8 years, if I hadn't been all over the lot, I'm not so sure that book would have had the same impact on me. I mean, by that time, I was prepared to read Ben Graham's book, which changed my life financially in an incredible way. I mean, I wouldn't be up here today if I hadn't read that book. But yeah, part of life is getting prepared so that when something does happen that's significant, you can grasp the significance of it and know what to do with it. And I would say that first 8 years of fooling around, even though it produced nothing financially to speak of, produced a lot in terms of getting my mind prepared for when I really did read something that made sense. So I was ready to accept it. And I actually went back and went to Columbia to study under Graham, and because of reading that book, and all kinds of things flowed out of it. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in the field, to do a few things. I'd still try and make it as intelligent as possible. I would try to stick with businesses I thought I understood. I'd still get out that sheet of paper, and I'd write, I'm doing this because, and just test my reasoning. And then I go back and read it a year later and see whether what you thought would be true turned out to be true. So I would always check myself. I believe in grading myself on everything. You know, doctors have postmortems, and they do it because they learn from postmortems. In business, people don't like to do postmortems. When I can be on the board of a company, and they can building plants or buying companies, and they never want it 2 years later to run a check on how that decision turned out, because it can be unpleasant. But you learn from postmortems, and you don't want to learn. It's way better to learn from other people's mistakes than your own, but you got to learn from a few of your own too. And the time to do it is when you're young. We can do maybe one more, and then we wrap this up at one, do we? Or maybe two more.
My name is Pete Walsh. I'm from Creighton Prep, and my question is, to what extent do you feel that the government, with the current policies of welfare and Social Security, is it financially competent and fiscally prepared for the future?
Well, I think that the country as a whole is quite well prepared for the future. That doesn't mean I would adopt every policy they have, but I think, A, we have an enormously rich society, and it'll get richer. Everyone isn't going to participate in that. Some won't participate because of physical disabilities, others because of mental disabilities, others because of shortcomings in the education they received when they were growing up, all kinds of reasons. We have a prosperous enough society to be able to take care of those people, and we should take care of them. And how we do it so that they feel most useful in life, and how we do it so that we continue to encourage people to be more productive themselves and all that. I mean, those are not easy questions, but that shouldn't take our eye off the ball of feeling we should do something about it. I pose this problem sometimes to people. I say, let's assume that it's 24 hours before you're born. And all of you can take this test, 24 hours before you're born. And a genie comes to you. And the genie says, what was your name again out there? Whatever, we'll call you Joe. And the genie says, Joe, says, you look pretty promising to me. I think you've got kind of a sense of fair play and a good mind. And so I'm going to let you have an extraordinary opportunity. I'm going to let you design the world into which you're going to be born in 24 hours. It's yours. You pick out the political rules, you pick out the economic rules, you pick out the social rules, you design the world. And when you're born in 24 hours, you're going to be born into that world. And that's the world that's going to exist for your lifetime, for your children's lifetime, for your grandchildren's lifetime. And you, having heard of some of these genie jokes in the past, would say, what's the catch? The genie says, well, it's a very slight catch. I said, when you're born in 24 hours, you're going to emerge in this world you designed. But what you don't know is whether you're going to be born black or white, male or female, rich or poor, bright or retarded, able-bodied or infirm, in the United States or Afghanistan. All you know is that you're going to reach into this barrel, which now has 6 billion balls, as we know, representing one person, every person in the world, and you're going to participate in what I call the ovarian lottery. You're going to take one ball out of that barrel, and you're never going to get another ball. That's you. You're going to get one ball, and now you're going to emerge. Now, what kind of rules do you want to have for that society, not knowing which ball you're going to get? Now, that I put to you is the way I think people should think about social policy. And if you're lucky enough to be born in this country, you've won the lottery already. But we should have a system, in my view, that encourages the Jack Welches and the Bill Gateses and all of that to work far beyond the time when it has any economic significance to them. We want people commanding those resources who are extremely able at commanding them. That's how the standard of living moves forward. So we should want, we should want Tom Osborne coaching in Nebraska. We should want Bill Gates designing software, and we don't want to mix up those two. We don't want to get Bill coaching in Nebraska. So you want a system that gets people to their potential and puts them in the position where they can do the most good for society. But you also want a system for the people who get the wrong ball. I mean, somebody's going to get the ball, that says 80 IQ. Somebody's going to get the ball that says this disease or that disease early in life that cripples them. And we've got a rich enough society that we can take care of those people. And I think that, to get back to your question, I think that this society will move more and more in that direction. It has the capability of moving more and more in that direction as our resources and our output increases. And I think that it has the will to do that in a general way, although, like I say, there have always been lots of fits and starts. So there is no shortage in the United States of resources. There's no shortage of output. You have to have a system that encourages people to behave to the limit of their abilities and puts them in the right place. But then you have to make sure that everybody gets taken care of, too. Now, we can do one more, and then we'll break. I'll let the fellow with the microphone, or woman here, make the decision.
Hi, my name is Ben Gold. I go to Brown Talbot. And I wanted to know, how do you think the media affects the world economically today?
Well, it's a small question. Well, what it obviously does, simply because it's moved so far technologically, is it's brought it together in a big way. I mean, I was over in China a few years ago, and I was right after the time of the women's conference in Beijing, and I was reading the Chinese coverage of that conference, and of course it had nothing to do with what was taking place, but the internet was coming in, and you can access the Washington Post or the New York Times or anything. I get the Washington Post at 9:30 here at night, in effect. I never could get it the next day through physical delivery, but by electronic delivery I can read it probably earlier than most of the people in Washington are reading it. So the ability to communicate and the degree to which the world can have awareness of what's going on every place in the world is just, it's been a quantum leap. And, that will have, there are a lot of things that come out of that. And net, they're a plus over time. But the ability of information to be available to everyone worldwide almost instantaneously, it can be huge advances in things like medicine, for example, just to pick one. So it's a net plus. It has a big effect, and the definition of media has now been expanded enormously. I mean, there were 3 television networks in the early 1960s, and that was it. There were 3 highways information traveled electronically, and if the 3 pieces of information were I Love Lucy, and something else, those were the 3 choices of information or entertainment that you had for tens and tens of millions of people sitting there looking at a tube. Now it's unlimited, and that's only, 3 or so decades. So it's just exploded, and it'll continue to explode. And net, I think it's a plus. And I think it's 1 o'clock. I want to thank you all. I wish you well. You're going to do terrific. Thanks.
Thank you.